Okay, thanks very much, Roger. So, yeah, I'm Phill Meyler. I'm the Publishing Development Director for Science, Technology and Medicine at Cambridge University Press. And this part is really a story about responding to the community, I think, in short. On the left there, you'll see that's the front of the Proceedings of the Royal Society. On the right is some book by a guy called Newton, who's been quoted already this morning. And the thing is, for hundreds of years, those formats really have been, in terms of scholarly communication, the only game in town. And certainly commissioning editors, any of you here who've ever been commissioning editors will have had the experience of talking to researchers and have them say, look, there's this thing that I've been working on. It's a kind of a high-level tutorial. I don't really want to develop this into a whole book. But on the other hand, it's not really something that fits naturally into a journal. So can you help? What can you do with that? And really, in my own case, for decades, we really had to say, actually, we can't really help with that. Equally, on the social sciences side, if you think about some of the big handbooks that were produced over the years, the age-old problems of having to wait and go at the pace of the slowest contributor. And again, we all know about that. So the really clear message from the market was, there's work here that's going unpublished in some sense because there isn't really a happy home for it. So we thought, is there something that we can do about that? Now, I should stress, we're not the only publisher that's addressed this point or tried to address this point, but I think we have a distinctive solution. So what we asked ourselves was, how would we blend the best of books and journals and provide a new vehicle for researchers? And so what we thought was you really need to have still a rigorous peer review and a focus on quality. So the Elements program, these are short pieces, and by short I mean 20 to 30,000 words or about 40 to 70 pages. And what that gives people is the space to do that high-level tutorial, to give those insights in a way that aren't really a full-length book, nor are they simply a research article. They're organized into defined series and curated by leaders in the field, so in terms of the editorial boards for each of these things. We have a rapid publication, so that's from approval to publication is about 12 weeks. And not only are we producing these things rapidly, but there's also an element here of, no pun intended, of encouraging the researchers themselves to be writing these things quickly, so that this is very current, these overviews. And also in terms of the functionality, of course, not only do you have just all of the advantages that digital provides, but we have things that we're able to offer to some of the points that Olivier was talking about inline video, for instance, and being able to attach data in these things. So you have a kind of functionality that hasn't existed before. We're also going to be updating these things, or at least allowing authors to update these on an annual basis, so they will stay current. And I should say, if this isn't heretical, we also have a print version of each one of these, so they're available not just on our platform in digital collections, but you'd find each individual one, for instance, on Amazon. And to the researchers, that physical format turns out to be an important thing. And what we've seen so far is that the POD sales have been really encouraging. So that point of inflection we were talking about, we aren't completely and utterly past that, it seems to me. The other thing about these is the breadth of them. So we've been setting up, we've got nearly 100 of these series now, and it's not just a science thing or a humanities thing or a social science. We have series in literature, philosophy, politics, international relations, electronics, earth sciences, medicine. It's really broad, and I think that reflects the demand from the community, as I say, listening to the community about the kinds of things they want. And in terms of the benefits for authors and for users, I think one of the key things is flexibility. So they aren't tied to a format that, to these two formats that we were talking about before that really trammel thinking. They have got the ability to sort of go into a subject in a bit more depth. Of course, there's that quality assurance in terms of the peer review and the rapid publication we talked about. And just going back on this point that's cropped up already a few times about visibility, having these things not just digitally on our platform, but also, for instance, just out there to people whose institutions don't have, who haven't purchased them, but being able to buy individual ones, for instance, on Amazon through retail channels, that gives an extra sort of dimension to visibility for authors that they're finding very attractive. Of course, we have to provide the same kind of indexing that we would for any of our existing products. The functionality, of course, that we talked about before. And in terms of coverage, this really means that you can provide an extra missing piece, a missing link, if you will, between textbook and book coverage and regular journal coverage. So that expansion of coverage, I think, is really important for this kind of product. And of course, we also have to be able to offer open access options as well to people. Just going back to that issue of search, so that's completely blurry, at least, and I'm much closer to it than you are, but the things that are ringed there in those ellipses, that's just a search on a term chosen at random. It's a plasmon, I think it was. But the returns there, those things in the box, in the ellipses are, at the bottom it says chapter from a book, the middle one is for an article from a journal, and the top one is an element. The researcher or the student isn't going to care where this thing has come from. What they have is a research need. They want to find out about something. So that's what I was talking about in terms of flexibility. There's a filling in there of the entire space and the information available. And of course, it's one thing to have an idea and to take it forward, but it's very important also to see, well, what does the community think of what you've been doing? So I've just put up there some comments from people who've been writing these things for us, and also some of the every single one of these series has gone through peer review to be set up in the first place. And there's a really encouraging response from the community. Yes, this was a missing thing, this sort of product. And we had a sort of a soft launch period. We launched this formally to institutional purchase in January, but in the soft launch period, with under 100 of these things, we had over 100,000 downloads. Now, that really, because they were open at that stage, that compared very favorably with the kinds of downloads that we were seeing for open access articles or chapters in open access books. So I think there's a real thirst for this kind of thing. And we were asked to do a little bit of crystal ball gazing. I think that we all are going to see more hybrid formats because people want more flexibility. I think of this kind or maybe of slightly different flavors, but something that gives people flexibility to write and communicate their ideas in a format that works for them is going to be increasingly important, I think. One thing we've seen very clearly from communities is that this kind of format works really well for emerging and interdisciplinary formats. So you might have something, for instance, at the boundary of engineering and physics or engineering and medicine. Those people don't have a common ground, maybe, or don't have a place that they can publish work, new protocols, new tutorials. This kind of format works really well for that. We have one in, for instance, that's coming through in the genetic causes of epilepsy. And each one of those is going to be the genetics plus the treatment types. Now, there isn't really a place for that. It's a really valuable content, I think. It also works really well for some of the practitioner-oriented areas, again, medicine, engineering. And I think we'll also see the development of this kind of thing into higher education as well. So we've already seen some of these are being picked up in graduate level teaching. I think some kind of development of this type of format could be really powerful in undergraduate teaching as well. So I think there'll be more of this stuff this kind of stuff coming in the future. And now I will shut up and pass on to Violaine.